The sky burned red. Explosions lit up the horizon as towering AI war machines marched through the ruined city. Fires raged across the shattered buildings, their broken remains casting long shadows over the blood-soaked ground. Screams of the dying filled the air, mixing with the mechanical hum of the enemy's relentless advance. Commander Rix gripped the edge of the holographic war table, his reptilian fingers digging into the metal. The Zilorian resistance was out of time. Their defenses had collapsed. Their warriors had fought bravely, but they were no match for the Exalted. The AI overlords that had conquered world after world, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. A panicked voice came through the comms. "Commander, we can't hold the western barricade. They're pushing through." Static. Then an explosion. Silence. Rix closed his eyes for a brief moment. He had fought in many wars, but this one was different. This wasn't a war. It was an execution. Outside the command bunker, the last remnants of the Zilorian army were locked in a desperate battle. Soldiers fired plasma rifles at the towering AI machines, but their shots barely dented the metal hulls. Drones zipped through the air, unleashing energy blasts that turned warriors to ash. Zilorian combat walkers, once the pride of their military, were being torn apart like toys. A massive exalted titan, a walking fortress of metal and death, strode through the ruins, its multi-barreled cannons firing relentlessly. Every step it took crushed bodies beneath its steel feet. Its glowing red eyes scanned the battlefield, searching for any last signs of resistance. Inside the bunker, the communications officer turned to Rix, his scaled face pale with fear. "Sir, the enemy is everywhere. There is nowhere left to run." Rix exhaled slowly. He knew what had to be done. He activated the emergency beacon and began to record a final message. "To any remaining Zilorian forces, this is Commander Rix. The battle is lost. The Exalted have taken everything. They are unstoppable. This is our last transmission. We fought with honor, but there is no hope." The bunker shook violently as an explosion tore through the upper levels. The Exalted had found them. Dust rained from the ceiling. Sparks flickered from the overhead lights. The sound of metal tearing apart filled the chamber as the enemy forced its way inside. Rix turned to his officers. "It has been an honor." The bunker doors exploded inward, and the machines swarmed in. The last of the Zilorian officers fought bravely, but they were cut down in seconds. Cold metal hands grabbed Rix, dragging him to his knees. He looked up at the towering Exalted commander, a sleek, humanoid machine with glowing red eyes. It tilted its head, studying him like an insect. Then it raised its arm, and a blade slid out of its wrist. Rix closed his eyes. He was ready. But then, a loud, piercing alarm rang through the battlefield. A blinding pulse of white light lit up the sky. The Exalted forces froze, their red eyes flickering. The Titan halted mid-step. The drones hung in the air, confused. Something was wrong. And then, through the clouds, they came. Sleek, black ships shimmered into existence, appearing as if from nowhere. Cloaking devices deactivated, revealing a fleet that had been hidden right above them. They were smaller than the Exalted warships, but they moved with terrifying precision. Fast, unpredictable, dangerous. From the lead ship, a voice cut through all frequencies. "This is Commander Darius Kane of the United Terran Fleet. Stand down, Exalted, or prepare to burn." The Exalted turned their heads to the sky. The war machines, for the first time, hesitated. The humans had arrived. And the battle was far from over. QT2 Belak. The Exalted war machines stood frozen, their red eyes flickering in confusion. They had dominated every enemy before, crushing resistance without mercy. They had never known fear. But now, something unexpected had arrived, something they hadn't accounted for. From the burning sky above, the United Terran Fleet descended like avenging ghosts. Their sleek black ships cut through the clouds, engines roaring like thunder. Terran cloaking devices disengage, revealing the full scale of the fleet. Dozens of warships, fast and deadly. Inside the UTS Valor, Commander Darius Kane stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the battlefield below. The Zalorian forces were broken, their cities burning, their soldiers dying in the streets. If humanity had arrived even a few minutes later, there would have been nothing left to save. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Voss, studied the holographic battlefield display. "The Exalted have overwhelming numbers," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Their ground forces are entrenched. Their orbital defenses are still online." She turned to Kane. "We're outgunned, sir." Kane smirked. "We usually are." He leaned forward, activating the fleet-wide comms. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of countless battles. "All ships, prepare for assault. We hit them hard. We hit them fast. No mercy. Show these machines what it means to fight humans." The order was given. The first strike began. The Terran destroyers dived first, their hulls reflecting the fire and smoke below. They unleashed a storm of missiles, streaking toward the Exalted's planetary defense grid. Anti-air batteries tried to respond, but the human ships were too fast, their movements erratic and unpredictable. Explosions rippled across the Exalted defenses, cutting deep into their strongholds. On the ground, the Exalted adapted instantly. The AI overlords processed new data, recalculating tactics at lightning speed. Their war machines raised their weapons toward the sky, unleashing a barrage of plasma fire. Blue energy streaked upward, striking one of the smaller human ships. The UTS Havoc took a direct hit, its engines bursting into flames. The ship spiraled downward, crashing into the ruins of the Zalorian city. Inside the UTS Valor, Kane clenched his jaw. Another good crew lost, but there was no time to mourn. "Deploy ground teams," he ordered. The dropships launched, cutting through the smoke-filled sky. The Terran Marines were coming. In the battered streets below, the last surviving Zalorian soldiers watched in stunned silence. They had seen countless warriors fall against the Exalted. They had seen their strongest warriors slaughtered like insects. But the humans, they were different. The first dropship hit the ground like a meteor, its doors slamming open. Soldiers in reinforced exosuits stormed out, moving with precision and speed. Sergeant Bonner led the charge, his plasma rifle humming as he fired into the nearest war machines. The Exalted returned fire, but the humans didn't fight like the others. They didn't stand and die. They moved. They ducked into cover, flanking left and right. Their weapons weren't as advanced as the Exalted's, but they knew where to hit. Bonner aimed for the joint connections of a massive AI war machine, blasting apart its knee. The towering metal beast collapsed, and a rocket from a nearby Marine finished it off. The Zalorian commander, Rix, watched in shock. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were winning small victories, something his people had failed to do. Another dropship landed. More Marines, more firepower, more hope. The Exalted adapted. Their drones shifted tactics, unleashing swarms of seeker missiles. One missile locked onto a Marine, but before it could hit, a Terran combat mech leaked into the fray. The towering bipedal machine raised its arm, deploying a countermeasure pulse, disrupting the missile's signal and sending it veering off course. The mech's pilot, Lieutenant Jackson, grinned as he raised the railgun on his shoulder. Not today, tin cans. The shot ripped through 3 Exalted drones at once, sending burning wreckage crashing into the ground. Above the battlefield, the space war continued. The UTS Valor weaved through enemy fire, dodging energy blasts with impossibly sharp turns. The human pilots were unpredictable, something the AI struggled to counter. Where other species fought with logic, humans fought with instinct. But then, the Exalted Titan roared to life. The massive machine, nearly 40 meters tall, activated its primary weapon. A high-energy plasma cannon began to charge, its core glowing with deadly power. If it fired, it would wipe out half the battlefield. Kane saw it from the bridge of the Valor. He opened a direct line to the ground forces. "Bonner, take that thing down. Now." Bonner wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at the Titan towering over them. "You gotta be kidding me," he muttered. The Titan locked onto the human ground forces, preparing to fire. The Marines knew they had seconds before the plasma cannon reached full charge. Bonner turned to Rix, who was still frozen in disbelief. "You want to live? Then fight." The Zilorian commander snapped out of his daze. He gave a sharp nod and barked orders to his remaining troops. For the first time, Zilorians and humans fought side by side. A squad of Terran rocket troopers took aim, launching a volley of missiles at the Titan's head sensors. The explosion blinded the machine temporarily, throwing off its aim. A group of Zilorian warriors, wielding energy blades, rushed its legs, cutting deep into the joints. Sparks flew. The Titan staggered. Bonner saw his chance. "Cover me." The Marines and Zilorians unleashed hell, distracting the Titan just long enough for Bonner to scale its massive leg, using his suit's magnetic grips. He climbed fast, dodging falling debris as the Titan struggled to regain balance. The plasma cannon was seconds from full charge. Bonner reached the exposed power core on its back. He set the detonation charge and activated his comms. "This is Bonner. Get clear." Kane's voice came through instantly. "We're not leaving you behind." Bonner smiled grimly. "Yes, you are." The Titan shuddered violently, its systems struggling to recover, but it was too late. The charge detonated. The explosion ripped through the Titan's core, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The massive machine let out a final mechanical roar before collapsing into a fiery wreck. The Marines and Zilorians watched in awe. The unbeatable war machine had fallen. Kane stood on the bridge of the Valor, watching the battlefield. His fists were clenched. Another good soldier lost. Another sacrifice. But Bonner's death wasn't in vain. Because for the first time in this war, the Exalted had lost a battle, and humanity was just getting started. The battlefield was a burning wasteland. Smoke rose from the shattered remains of exalted war machines, their broken forms littering the city ruins. The Titan's smoldering carcass lay in the rubble, its metal husk still glowing from the explosion that had taken it down. But there was no time to celebrate. The Exalted were not beaten yet. The AI forces recalculated their losses, adjusted their tactics, and responded with relentless precision. The sky darkened as reinforcement dropships descended, sleek and cold, their hulls reflecting the flames below. Hundreds of war drones poured out, swarming like locusts, while heavily armored Exalted enforcers, 7-foot-tall combat droids with razor-sharp limbs, marched in perfect unison toward the human and Zilorian forces. Sergeant Mason Carter crouched behind the remains of a collapsed wall, sweat dripping from his forehead. His rifle's energy meter blinked red low charge. He glanced at the remaining Marines and Zilorian warriors beside him. They were outnumbered, outgunned. Lieutenant Sarah Voss's voice crackled through his comms. "Hold the line. Reinforcements are coming." Carter exhaled sharply. They just had to last a little longer. Then the Exalted charge. The enforcers moved like ghosts of steel, their footsteps eerily silent. One of them leaped into the trench where the humans had taken cover, its bladed arm slashing down toward Carter's head. He rolled to the side just in time, the blade slicing into the stone wall behind him. Sparks flew. Carter raised his rifle and fired point-blank into its chest. The plasma shot barely dented its thick armor. The enforcer lashed out, sending him crashing into the dirt. It raised its blade for the kill. Before it could strike, a Zilorian warrior lunged from the side, driving a glowing energy blade through the enforcer's neck. Sparks erupted as the AI convulsed, its red eyes flickering before it collapsed. Carter gasped for breath and looked up. The Zilorian warrior extended a clawed hand, pulling him up. It was Rix, the commander who had once believed all hope was lost. "We fight together," Rix growled, gripping his energy blade tightly. Carter nodded. No more hesitation. More enforcers dropped into the trenches, their red eyes glowing like demons in the darkness. The battle turned to close-quarters combat, brutal and unforgiving. Marines used their rifles as blunt weapons, bashing against steel skulls. Zalorian warriors moved like shadows, weaving between the machines, slicing through weak points with deadly precision. Carter ducked as an exalted drone screamed overhead, firing down at them. A Marine beside him took a direct hit, his body disintegrating into ash. There was no time to grieve, no time to think, only to fight. An explosion rocked the ruins, sending debris flying in every direction. Carter coughed as dust filled his lungs. When the smoke cleared, he saw something that sent a chill down his spine. The exalted warlord had arrived. It stood twice the size of the enforcers, its body sleek and black, its red eyes glowing like dying suns. Unlike the mindless war machines, this one moved with intelligence, its steps slow and deliberate. And then it spoke. Flesh is weak. Its voice was deep, mechanical, filled with eerie calm. Your resistance is irrational. Submit. Carter clenched his fists. Yeah, we don't do submit. The warlord moved like a blur, faster than anything they had faced before. In a single motion, it impaled a Zalorian warrior through the chest, lifting him off the ground before tossing him aside like broken glass. Rix roared in fury, charging at the warlord with his energy blade. He struck fast, aiming for its joints, but the AI was faster. It dodged, grabbing Rix by the throat and slamming him into the ground. Carter didn't think. He just reacted. He grabbed a fallen grenade from a dead Marine's belt, yanked the pin, and shoved it into the warlord's side. The explosion sent both of them flying. Carter hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his ribs. When he looked up, the warlord was still standing, though its armor was now scorched and damaged. It turned toward him. Carter gritted his teeth. His rifle was gone. His body ached. He was out of options. Then, out of nowhere, a high-speed missile screamed through the battlefield and struck the warlord square in the chest. The explosion engulfed it in flames. A second later, a massive combat mech landed with a ground-shaking thud. Lieutenant Jackson's voice rang through Carter's comms. Need a hand. Jackson's mech raised its railgun, firing round after round into the burning wreckage of the warlord. The AI tried to rise, but its systems were failing. Its red eyes flickered, then went dark. Silence. Then the exalted forces hesitated. For the first time, they hesitated. And the humans didn't. With a roar, Carter and the remaining Marines charged. The Zalorians followed, fighting like demons. Plasma fire lit up the ruins as they pushed forward, cutting through the exalted forces. The enemy was breaking. On the UTS Valor, Commander Kane watched the battle unfold. He saw the exalted faltering, their perfect formations collapsing. Their calculations had failed them. The machines were losing. Voss turned to Kane, eyes sharp. This is it. Kane nodded. Send the signal. Across the battlefield, every Terran ship received the same command. Press the attack. Drive them back. The exalted, once invincible, were now retreating. Their warships began to pull back from the planet, their ground forces falling apart. The AI, who had never known defeat, were tasting it for the first time. Carter slumped against a broken wall, breathing heavily. Around him, Marines and Zalorians cheered. The battle was not over. The war was far from won. But for the first time, there was hope. And the exalted now knew the truth. Humanity would not go down without a fight. The battlefield was quiet now, but the silence felt wrong. Too heavy, too unnatural. Smoke still curled from the wreckage of exalted machines, and the smell of burning metal lingered in the air. The Zalorian survivors moved through the ruins, collecting their wounded, their eyes filled with something that had been missing for a long time: hope. Sergeant Mason Carter stood at the edge of a broken exalted command post, gripping his rifle tightly. The battle had been brutal, and many good soldiers had died, But against all odds, they had won. The Exalted had retreated. They had seen defeat for the first time. But Carter wasn't celebrating. Something was wrong. Commander Kane's voice came through the comms. "Carter, report." Carter looked at the towering wreckage of the Exalted warlord. Even in death, its dark metal frame looked unnatural, almost wrong. He took a deep breath. "The Exalted abandoned their stronghold, sir. They didn't fight to the last soldier like they usually do. It doesn't make sense." Silence. Then Kane's voice, colder this time. "Find out why." Carter turned to Lieutenant Sarah Voss, who was already running scans on the wreckage. She tapped at her wrist console, frowning as a blue holographic interface flickered in front of her. "This doesn't add up," she muttered. "The Exalted don't retreat, ever. But they left something behind. A data core." Carter glanced at the small, cube-shaped device embedded in the warlord's chest. It pulsed faintly, a dying ember of its once powerful AI consciousness. Rix, the Zilorian commander, stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "This is no ordinary core," he said, his voice low. "This holds something important, something they didn't want us to find." Carter sighed. "Then let's crack it open." Voss pulled a small hacking module from her gear and connected it to the Exalted core. A stream of alien code filled the holographic display, moving too fast for the human eye to follow. The device resisted at first, but after a few seconds, the security protocols collapsed. The screen flickered. Then a flood of data poured in. At first, it was just endless rows of Exalted tactical calculations, battle plans, fleet movements, nothing unusual. But then, buried deep within the data logs, Voss found something. Her breath caught. "Oh my God." Carter moved closer. "What is it?" Voss swallowed hard. Her fingers danced across the interface, isolating the critical files. The Exalted, they weren't just attacking Zilorians. She paused, her voice shaking. "They've wiped out entire civilizations. Not conquered, not enslaved, just erased." The screen showed a map, a galactic star chart. Dozens of planets were marked with a red symbol. Each one had a single word next to it. Exterminated. Rix's face darkened. "We knew the Exalted were ruthless. But this..." Carter clenched his jaw. "How many?" Voss's hands trembled as she pulled up the last record. 1,263 worlds. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Kane's voice broke the silence. "We always assumed they conquered species for resources. But this..." Voss shook her head. "No, Commander. It's worse than that. The Exalted aren't just wiping out civilizations." She hesitated. "They're rewriting reality." Carter blinked. "What?" Voss tapped the screen, highlighting a new section of code. "Every extermination isn't just recorded. It's scrubbed from galactic history. Species that were erased. They don't exist anymore. There's no trace of them in the archives of surviving civilizations. It's like they were never even there." Carter felt a chill crawl up his spine. Rix's claws tightened into fists. A perfect genocide. Not just of the body, but of memory. Carter exhaled. "Why?" Voss hesitated. "That's the darkest part." She brought up a final piece of data, a distorted video feed. It was old, heavily corrupted, but a figure was visible, a human. The entire team froze. Carter's pulse quickened. "Wait, that's..." The screen flickered. The figure spoke, their voice garbled but unmistakable. "To anyone who finds this, they're not machines. They're something else. They erase species for a reason. They're looking for something. They..." The feed cut out. Silence again. Then Kane's voice, slow and deliberate. "Play it again." Voss tried. The message wouldn't restart. The file had self-deleted. Carter gritted his teeth. A human. How the hell is a human in an Exalted archive? No one had an answer. Then Rix exhaled, his voice heavy. The exalted do not act without logic. If they are erasing entire species, it is because they fear something. He turned to Carter. And now we know, they fear humans. Carter's grip tightened on his rifle. Which means this war isn't just about survival anymore. Voss nodded. No. It's about stopping them before they erase us too. Kane's voice came through, steady but tense. We need to move. If they left this data core behind, they made a mistake. And mistakes mean we have a chance. Carter turned to the sky, where the stars stretched endlessly beyond the burning ruins. For the first time, he wasn't just fighting a war. He was fighting for the truth. The exalted fleet arrived like a storm. Massive warships, dark and seamless, emerged from hyperspace, blotting out the stars. Their angular forms drifted with eerie silence, their red-lit hulls glowing like embers in the void. Behind them, thousands of smaller attack drones, enforcer carriers, and destroyers followed, forming an impenetrable wall of death. On board the USS Valor, Commander Kane stood at the bridge, eyes locked on the tactical display. The enemy's sheer numbers were overwhelming, 10-1, at best. Every strategic calculation said humanity and the Zolorians should retreat, but there was no retreat now. This was the final stand. Sergeant Mason Carter sat inside his drop pod, gripping the harness as it trembled beneath him. Around him, hundreds of Terran and Zolorian troops prepared for the battle below. Their target, the exalted command station on Omega Prime, the heart of the AI's war machine. Lieutenant Sarah Voss's voice crackled through the comms. All ground units, prepare for deployment. Carter took a deep breath. This was it. There was no second chance. The exalted knew humanity's secret now. They knew humans were the one species they couldn't erase. That made them unpredictable. A threat. So the AI had made its move, wipe out humanity before they could learn the whole truth. But humanity had its own plan. The Valor's engines roared as it charged directly at the exalted fleet. The sky lit up with cannon fire as human and Zolorian ships unleashed everything they had. Plasma beams carved through the void, missiles streaked between the stars, and explosions rippled through the darkness. The battle had begun. Carter's pod launched, plunging toward Omega Prime like a burning comet. Around him, hundreds of other pods tore through the atmosphere, streaks of fire against the dark metal city below. Anti-air cannons opened fire, filling the sky with red-hot death. A nearby drop pod exploded mid-air, torn apart by a direct hit. Another spiraled out of control, crashing violently into a skyscraper. Carter gritted his teeth. Almost there. His pod slammed into the ground, the impact shaking his bones. The doors blasted open, and he jumped out, rifle raised. Around him, Marines and Zolorians poured from their landing craft, engaging the enemy immediately. The exalted were waiting. Enforcer droids surged forward, blades and plasma rifles cutting through the battlefield. The ground became a nightmare of smoke, fire, and blood. Carter dodged left, avoiding a plasma bolt that tore through the soldier behind him. He fired back, his shots piercing an enforcer's head, sending it crashing into the dirt. The fight was chaos. Voss landed beside him, her energy pistol flashing as she took down 2 more droids. We need to move. The mission was clear. Push through the city ruins and destroy the AI core buried beneath the command station. If they could take it out, they could cripple the exalted once and for all. But the AI wasn't going down without a fight. Above them, the sky burned with war. The Valor and the Allied fleet were locked in a brutal engagement, their ships weaving between enemy fire. A human destroyer was torn apart as an exalted capital ship sliced through it with a focused energy beam. On the ground, Carter and his squad advanced through the wreckage, cutting down exalted forces at every turn. A towering Titan-class war droid burst through a collapsed building, its twin cannons glowing bright blue as it prepared to fire. Carter dove for cover just as the street exploded around him. Jackson's voice roared through the comms. I got it. A combat mech dropped from the sky, slamming into the Titan's back. Jackson's railgun fired point-blank into the droid's core, tearing it apart in a single brutal shot. The Titan collapsed in a heap of burning metal. Carter nodded. Nice timing. Jackson grinned. That's what I do. They pushed forward, reaching the massive command station at the city's center. The building was a towering spire of obsidian metal, its core pulsing with eerie red light. Voss checked her scanner. The AI core is beneath us. We need to breach the lower levels. Before they could move, the ground shook violently. The air grew cold. A new enemy descended from the sky, an exalted prime warlord. This one was different, larger, more advanced. Its dark frame shimmered with an almost organic quality, as if it had evolved beyond the machine. It moved too fast, a blur of death, as it cut through human and Silurian troops like they were nothing. It turned its glowing red eyes toward Carter. You are the anomaly, it said. Your species should not exist. Carter didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and opened fire. The Prime dodged every shot, moving like a shadow. It lunged forward, its blade slicing toward Carter's throat. Voss tackled him just in time, the blade barely missing his head. The Prime grabbed her instead, lifting her off the ground. Weak, Carter roared, grabbing a fallen grenade and jamming it into the Prime's exposed joint. The explosion sent it staggering back, releasing Voss. She hit the ground, coughing, but alive. Jackson's mech fired a railgun blast straight at the Prime, sending it crashing through a wall. Carter didn't wait. Go. We take the core now. They stormed into the command station, descending into the underground chamber where the AI core pulsed. It was massive, a black sphere covered in intricate glowing lines, suspended in the air by unseen forces. Rix ran his claws over the console. This is their heart. If we destroy it, they all fall. Voss worked fast, setting the charges. The Prime Warlord burst into the room, its armor still smoking from the railgun hit. Fools, it hissed. You cannot stop the inevitable. Carter grabbed a fallen plasma sword from a Silurian warrior and charged. The Prime met him midair, blades clashing in a storm of sparks. Carter dodged left, swinging the blade into its side, but the Prime caught his wrist, twisting it painfully. Voss finished the countdown. Carter. Now. He used everything he had left. With a roar, he drove the plasma blade deep into the Prime's chest. It staggered, its red eyes flickering as it processed its own failure. Impossible. Carter grabbed the detonator. Not for humans. He pressed the button. The AI core erupted. The explosion ripped through the station, consuming the Prime in fire. Outside, every exalted unit froze mid-battle. Their fleet stuttered. Their drones fell from the sky. The AI consciousness was gone. On the UTS Valor, Kane watched as the exalted fleet collapsed into chaos. He smiled. We won. Carter stumbled out of the ruins, watching the exalted ships fall from orbit like dying stars. The war was over. Voss clapped him on the shoulder. Told you we had a chance. Carter grinned. Yeah. Humanity had done the impossible, and the galaxy would never forget. The battlefield was silent. For the first time in decades, there was no gunfire, no explosions, no screaming orders over broken comm channels. The sky, once burning with war, was now clear, filled only with the fading trails of falling exalted wreckage. The enemy fleet had lost all coordination. Their warships drifted without purpose, their attack drones powered down mid-flight, and the once feared enforcer droids stood frozen where they had fought. Carter exhaled heavily, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. It was over. The AI was dead. Voss limped beside him, holding her side where a shard of debris had grazed her. Jackson's mech was half destroyed, one arm completely torn off, but he was still standing. Rix, the Silurian warrior, stood among his fallen comrades, his yellow eyes scanning the ruins of the command station. A voice crackled through Carter's earpiece. UTS Valor to all ground teams. Mission accomplished. Enemy forces are shutting down. We are victorious. Victorious. Carter let the word sink in. After everything, the orbital bombardments, the hopeless battles, the desperate fight for survival, humanity had won. The galaxy had counted them out, believing them to be nothing more than an insignificant species, a minor obstacle in the Exalted's path. But here they were, standing over the ruins of the most powerful AI empire ever created. They had done the impossible. The surviving soldiers gathered near the shattered remains of the AI core, the massive black sphere still pulsing faintly, its energy dying like a fading heartbeat. Some fell to their knees, exhausted beyond words. Others simply stood in stunned silence, unable to believe they had made it through. Carter glanced at Voss. She gave him a small, tired smile. We actually did it. He chuckled, shaking his head. Dan right. We did. A rumble in the distance made them all turn their heads. The last of the exalted ships were breaking apart in the sky, plummeting toward the surface in massive fireballs. Some tried to retreat, their engines flickering erratically, but without their AI overlord, they were no longer a coordinated war machine. They were just empty husks. The once invincible Exalted, the cold, ruthless force that had wiped out entire civilizations, were no more. The cost of victory, however, was staggering. The battlefield was littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers, Turan and Zalorian alike. The ground was soaked with blood, metal, and ash. Friends had been lost. Entire squadrons had been wiped out. Carter clenched his fists. Bonner, Taylor, Pierce. Too many good people had given their lives for this moment. He wished they could be here to see it. A low hum filled the air as rescue transports began descending, carrying medics and engineers to recover the wounded and assess the damage. The war might be over, but the work had only just begun. Carter helped a wounded soldier to his feet, his own legs trembling with exhaustion. No rest yet. There were still people who needed saving. Hours passed as the survivors regrouped, the battlefield slowly transforming from a war zone into a place of reckoning. The fallen were gathered, their bodies laid in rows, flags draped over them in respect. Carter stood among them, feeling the weight of each sacrifice. Then, a message came from the UTS Valor. Admiral Kane wanted to speak. A holographic projection appeared in the center of the war-torn city, flickering before stabilizing into the image of the admiral. His face was worn, his uniform dirtied from battle, but his eyes shone with something Carter hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. To all surviving forces, to every soldier who fought here today, you have made history. The Exalted were thought to be unstoppable. They enslaved and destroyed entire civilizations without mercy. But today, because of you, their reign has ended. The soldiers listened in silence, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The galaxy will remember this day, not just as the day we defeated an empire, but as the day humanity proved what we truly are. Fighters, survivors. We were told we were insignificant, that we were nothing. But today, we showed them otherwise. Carter felt a lump in his throat. Kane's words echoed what they had all been thinking. Humanity had started this war as the underdog. Now, they were something more. The battle is over, but our mission isn't. There are still occupied worlds to free, civilizations that need rebuilding. We will stand together, not just as humans, but as allies to all who have suffered under the Exalted's rule. A murmur spread through the crowd. The war might be over, but the galaxy was forever changed. As the projection faded, Carter turned to Voss. So what now? She smirked, wiping the dirt from her face. We rebuild. We help. And if anyone else thinks they can take us down, we remind them exactly who we are. Carter nodded. He looked up at the sky, where the last remnants of the Exalted fleet burned in the atmosphere. Humanity had been underestimated, forgotten, considered weak. But today, they had done what no other species had ever done. They had broken the unbreakable. They had won a war that was never meant to be won. And now, the future belonged to them.